Welcome, everyone. I'm Doug Greenwald with the Convergint Technologies Digital Transformation team, and I'm very excited to be talking to you all today about a topic that is seeing some very fast moving adoption, and that's cloud access and video surveillance. And as you can tell for this session, you won't have to just put up with me, as I'm joined by Steve Washburn, which if you know Steve, he's been a sales leader here in Convergint out of our Minneapolis office for several years and has really leaned into video analytics, SaaS solutions, specifically around artificial intelligence. And this is likely his first presentation that I've been able to have with him now that he has joined officially the digital transformation team as our sales leader. So Steve, I'd love if you could just take a minute, maybe introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the vision that you have for the team and how you're helping to drive innovation within Convergint.
Well, thanks, Doug, and welcome everyone, and thank you for taking some time to join us today. I really think this is one of the most interesting and critical topics as security professionals, is understanding how we're going to evolve what we've done for honestly many years on premise in our own data centers and our own buildings, and moving some of those technologies up to the cloud. And it really is the foundation or the building block to getting access to the innovation, the new, as Doug alluded to, AI, computer vision stuff, which we really view as Convergint and the whole digital transformation team, as they all go together. So you can't do AI and computer vision without eventually moving up to the cloud. And we're seeing a lot of the big technology companies, the Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts, starting to come into this space. And we'll talk a little bit about that today with some of the architecture discussions that we'll have, talk about how some of that AI and ML technology is helping make this whole transition possible and not, basically kill wide area networks and overwhelm the connectivity up to the cloud. But looking forward to the topic, Doug, and getting a chance to present with you and just kind of share some ideas with the rest of our colleagues. So thanks for leading this, by the way. This is Doug did all the heavy lift and the hard work on this, and really appreciate that, because really builds on a lot of his expertise and knowledge. So it's fun to be able to be with you today.
No, appreciate that, Steve. And I'm excited as well to spend the time with you and everybody here watching. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to take away from this session. And ultimately, the first thing is we want to kind of talk about the evolution of on-premise kind of legacy technologies and how they're evolving into cloud platforms, and really what are some of the different technical approaches we're seeing within the market, and more importantly, talk about some of the pros associated with that. What are the cost benefits? What are the business benefits associated with it? And we're also going to talk a little bit about not necessarily the cons associated with it, but just some of the potential roadblocks within organizations that we're seeing and hearing, and how we're helping the physical security teams overcome some of those challenges. And then ultimately, during this session, we want it to be as much of an interactive opportunity as possible. So on the right side of your screen, you're going to see a little chat button. Feel free to send us some questions in real time. We'll take a look at those. We'll try and answer them kind of slide by slide or topic by topic, so that we can have as much engagement as possible. And ultimately, at the end, we'll also leave time for additional questions. So with that, we'll take a look a little bit of what we're planning to cover here. We're going to look at some of the things that we're seeing in the news, because there's a lot happening around this. There's a lot happening with funding associated with some of these companies. We're going to look at just how the space is evolving, the architecture associated with these platforms, those benefits, as I mentioned before. And again, we really want to talk about, specific to organizations as much as we can to a high level, but really, what does it take to be an early adopter? What are the benefits that you might glean from going down this path? And of course, we'll have plenty of time, hopefully, to do some Q&A. So why cloud access and video? Let's just take a look at what's happening in the headlines. And as you can see, I mean, just a few snippets here and there, we're seeing a lot in the space generate buzz because of the user interface, because of the APIs available to integrate with not just security tools today, but really from a business intelligence perspective. We're seeing these solutions be a lot more quick to market and being able to leverage, business intelligence and data analytics that can now evolve into a much bigger, more business-focused ecosystem that doesn't just have to rely on physical security. Now, Steve, I know from your side of the business, you're seeing that evolution happen very rapidly. I think that's one of the reasons you were excited about joining this team, because you see where it's coming. What are some areas that you've been able to take away, and just how the industry is moving so quickly around this topic?
Yeah, Doug, I think that's really a key message that people need to understand is the old slow-moving security industry is long gone. Um, One of the things, as I was looking through the slide and just thinking and reflecting back, is, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and the idea that AWS and Microsoft are moving into our spaces. There was a big press release at the end of last year where AWS has launched both a partnership with Milestone, where they're able to take a Milestone basically software, host that in an AWS environment. But they've also launched and introduced some very exciting edge-based processing technology using the latest AI and ML technology. And again, their interest and purpose of that is to drive AWS consumption, right? That's why they want to do these things. But what's so fascinating to me as a, I always say I'm just an old security guy, right? I used to do analog matrix switchers and all these cables running into these things, and you're routing this video all over the place. And, today we don't even give that a second thought, how we can route video and where we can put that at. But it's really interesting to see those companies coming into our space and really understanding the benefit, the value proposition. And we're seeing that both on the residential side with, kind of some of the things that both Amazon and Google are doing. And then, like I said, on the commercial side as well. So it's a very exciting time for security professionals, for people like you and me to be in this space, to be helping both our colleagues and our customers understand, kind of why some of these things are happening and the opportunities.
Well, and let's just take a look at what's happened and transpired over the last year, right? It's really forced a change in a lot of ways, where now a lot of people want to be able to remotely manage their security operations. And a lot of other things around like touchless biometrics or access control being driven by facial recognition, with those analytics being performed in the cloud now, is something that, had it not been, unfortunately for COVID, it's really, there's always things that kind of drive technology changes. And I think that's something that also over the last year, we've seen a lot of people start to reconsider the challenges of managing a lot of on-premise architecture and the amount of critical, individuals that are required to come into the office now and manage that. How easy is it, potentially for organizations to shift? They're already shifting a lot of the other business technologies to the cloud. Physical security now can kind of follow suit as a result of what's kind of transpired over the last year. Are you seeing more of that? I mean, I feel like I'm having a lot more conversation around it, just because organizations are looking for ways to minimize, not just touch surfaces and all of that, but also minimize the impact to teams having to be so tied to the physical office space.
Yeah, Doug, 100% right. I think all of us have seen what I'm going to call the floodgates open up. And I do think, a little tipping point that occurred was the pandemic, where organizations were looking at some of these things and saying, well, what can we do different? How can we be more flexible, elastic? Things that the IT sector and space have been talking about for a number of years. I always kind of smile or laugh. It's like, hey, we want to talk to you about this new thing about moving your access controller video system to the cloud. And honestly, it's really not that new, right? This technology and some of these ideas have been around for a long time. But it's just, as security professionals, we're very risk averse. We have a very, kind of this inclination to control things. That's kind of the world that we like to be in. So it's a little scary. It can be a little, kind of unnerving to be in that position where we're going to be, maybe exposing ourselves to some things that we didn't think about, or maybe we didn't want to explore or kind of engage in. But it is pretty real. We are seeing these things happen more and more. And, another thing that I think we'll talk about later on too is just the sustainability factor. There's a lot of organizations that are, really committing to new sustainability goals. And if we can think about how we can extract some of these server environments, we can get rid of some of that power and energy consumption in some of these buildings. That does help these organizations also go down some sustainability goals as well. So there's really a lot of reasons that are, seem to be vectoring all together for organizations to be interested to have these discussions, and not just the small, because there have been a lot of small adopters of these types of systems and technologies, really for the last few years. Just, I'm going to say 1, 2, 4 type of card reader or camera deployments, but now we're starting to see this move into the enterprise space, and large organizations be of interest in at least asking us questions. Well, how do we do this? What are the things we need to be aware of?
Absolutely. I think you touched on something that kind of leads us into our next slide, which is the fact that there is a concern about giving up control. And anytime you kind of move to the cloud, there are going to be potential risks, right? And so obviously there's a lot of positive things that have been happening, and certainly this slide isn't meant to call out Verkada specifically, right? The instance of what happened with Verkada, right, is a completely preventable controls internal to them issue, where a developer still had access to other instances, and it was totally preventable. So it's not like they got hacked, breached, anything along those lines. This was a internal controls failure. But that still highlights that as people move very quickly in this space, and some of these organizations are still early stage, that there are some potential for this as they go through their security audits and everything along those lines. What kind of fallout coming off of this, Verkada situation and some of the other, challenges that we've seen across this? Steve, are you seeing some, did you see the market kind of retract as a result of this?
Well, I don't know if the market itself retracted, and it was really a tragic, sad situation, right, Doug? Because like you said, it was totally preventable. This was an internal controls issue. It had nothing to do with the core architecture, security, or anything of the way, Verkada built their technology. But what I think it's brought forward is, that point, right? What do we as professionals have to do to make sure that, we understand what all these risks are? And that's one of the things that I really appreciate from the Convergint perspective. We've actually added resources in our organization, and the way we engage and we talk with some of our product partners have changed because of this. And we're thinking about how we can extend our governance, our compliance, all of the things that we do day in and day out as, stewards of our customers' data, stewards of our customers, kind of the old adage, the best service provider, right? So how do we extend that and make sure that we're looking at some of these cloud providers in a way that, maybe is asking some of the hard questions, thinking about it, in a manner that, we just don't, I'm going to say accept everything, be a little critical on what we're seeing. But I think when we talk about these ideas or these topics with our customers, they understand them. And because there's been so much momentum, so much transition occurring, whether it be online banking, whether it be just all of the other systems that these organizations have moved to the cloud, they're not per se scared off of things like this. It's just making them more educated. It's getting better questions being asked. And it's really part of the reason our team exists, right? Is so that we can help our customers and our colleagues navigate some of these things. And we have that internal experience to go, well, we understand what some of these issues are. We already have the relationships built with the, basically the Convergint legal team to make sure that we can bring forward a good solution, be our customer's best service provider. So I don't think it's going to stop anything. I think it's just going to make the market and us better educated, and then, basically provide a better service to our customers.
100%, right. And so, and I think, Verkada aside, right, there's so much changing too, that there are regulations now starting to be applied because the technology is getting so good. So for example, I've got some examples right here where the US biometric laws for facial recognition, as well as in the EU, are starting to pop up in very specific areas because there's concerns about the information being used for law enforcement or being used to identify somebody, where they were, why they were there, right? So a lot of information now is being looked at as, something that needs to be regulated more effectively. And so we're starting to see some laws pop up where if you're looking at doing facial recognition for access control, for be on the lookout type of instances at your facilities, you now have to take into consideration how it's going to be regulated and what risk your organization may be put at by deploying this type of technology. Are you also getting into some of these conversations, Steve, on the AI and the vision side of things?
Yeah, 100%, Doug. And vision is especially interesting. So Europe, the EU actually is, in my opinion, a leader on some of these things and some of the privacy issues that exist. So when we're starting to think about, let's say, a global camera system, right, a global video management system, and if we're going to store that information or any of that data up into the cloud, we need to understand how we're fitting in with different privacy requirements, different governance requirements. Just like you said, there's actually just a big article this week about Facebook, and Facebook's was pulling all of their data back into data centers in essence in the United States. And I believe it was Ireland, a court in Ireland said, no, you can't be doing that. So understanding where those data residency rules, whether it be access control or video, AI, machine learning, whatever that is, facial, all those pieces are very, very important. And those are something that we want to be talking about and understanding, especially when we're working with our global customers, right? If it's a regional customer, the regional laws are getting very interesting as well in the States. There are certain states where understanding what those look like and how those work and how those function are critical. Legal's been doing a great job. The SLED team's been helping out quite a bit with tracking and monitoring all of this. And I think we're going to get better, at all of those pieces and understanding it. But that's a never-ending changing game, right? So it's not going to be check the box and we're done with that. We're going to have to constantly keep aware and vigilant to what some of those changing requirements are, because the privacy aspect of what occurs for both an access and video system is, it's accelerating, right? The demands and expectations from the market are increasing, and we need to be aware of those things and provide the right guidance to our customers.
Absolutely, right. And so I think that kind of leads into where, there's a lot of money flowing into the space. There's a lot of new entries into this that are cloud-first solution providers. And again, this is a very small snapshot of some of the organizations that we're looking at, that we're trying to understand where they fit in the cloud-first ecosystem. But it gives you an idea of just how many people are entering the space to be, to challenge, the Linnells and Genetechs and software houses of the world. But, even knowing that these organizations are evolving in the cloud very quickly as well. They recognize that, the landscape is changing, and they're bringing out solutions that can also, kind of take their existing customer base and move them forward into that cloud or hybrid type model. So from that perspective, we see the space moving very quickly, right? And this is a huge change from years of past that you kind of alluded to, where security has always kind of been a few years behind, where, InfoSec is, where IT is from an implementation, sometimes even where the business is even at from an app development perspective. Or, so many organizations have been moving their, HR databases to the cloud. If you're comfortable with that data being there, why wouldn't physical security naturally follow behind?
Yeah, and I think you've seen that a lot, Doug, especially in the identity assurance side of the, practice that we do. And I think one of the things that it's really quite interesting to me is, and these are just a snapshot of some of our, longtime partners that have helped us, and all of them are at various different stages. I think Genetech has had their Stratacast solution out in the market for a number of years. they've had a lot of different success with that, and they're really accelerating some of that work. And Linnell's doing a great job of bringing forward some new ideas. Axis and Bosch have got some amazing things that they're doing with, in essence, driving alerts, analytics, kind of combining some things with this, quasi-hybrid type of environment. And it's just really very interesting to me as to where we're at in the industry, where we're at with the evolution. And I think it's just a testament to the fact that all of these customers, or all these partners, are recognizing the value to move and evolve to these, basically cloud first type of platforms.
Definitely, which I think now it becomes, how do you want to manage your business, right? Do you want to continue to kind of be in the business of managing servers and network architecture and client deployments, or do you want to kind of migrate to where a lot of the industry is going, kind of that SaaS subscription model, where upgrades, patches, fixes, redundancy, that high availability that would keep a lot of team members up at night can be, not entirely, but pushed over predominantly to those cloud providers in AWS, Cloud, Google Cloud, Azure. So you've got this now kind of shift, right? Where you've already been paying probably some type of subscription for your on-premise licenses. Now you can pay for those same subscriptions on a year-over-year basis, but maybe adding in some additional cost over the period of time to the subscription model from a SaaS model reduces headcount. It reduces the ability for teams to have to manage a lot of stuff that was creating cost, complexity, and internal challenges from that perspective. And really what we also can then look to is, how do you scale with that growth of your organization, right? You can scale much more quickly with a cloud solution than you can with an on-premise one. So, this obviously boils down to a couple of things, right? Where is your organization at within the digital transformation space? Do you see a lot of, applications being moved to the cloud, or are you still seeing that on-premises, how our business is going to continue to proceed for the foreseeable future? And if that's the case, right, this may be too early for your company. But if critical business infrastructure like HR systems or ITSM projects are moving to cloud-based solutions where, PII and those identities associated with those systems are sitting in the cloud, this may be a good time to start having some of those conversations.
Yeah, Doug, to just add on to that a little bit, is one of the things, and I think many of us have gone through a big major version upgrade, right? You've gone from version 5 to version 6 in your access control system, or version 3 to version 4 in your video system. And when we're going through, and we would historically do these large major version releases, they were very disruptive to the business. They were very challenging to implement. We had new user interfaces typically showing up, and really the users, the people that basically work in these systems, that disruption has gotten, they're just not used to it, because the new way of delivering technology is it's always current, right? There's new features being added, and it just happens, right? We wake up in the morning, our operating system's been upgraded on our laptop. We have a new software version on our phone, and these apps are constantly current, right? And I think that's going to be something that we're going to see more and more expectations. Our consumers, the users of these systems, want the latest and greatest features now. They don't want to schedule a 6-month project upgrade to upgrade from version 1 to version 2, right? They just want those features now. And so that's going to be, I think, an accelerant where people are going to look at, no, I want this on demand. I want this stuff, the upgrades, the patches, the fixes. I want all those new features in that very agile, rapid development, rapid deployment. And if there is something wrong, they don't want to wait 6 months to get it fixed, right? They want it fixed tomorrow. And so those expectations, I think, are feeding all of these transitions into this new architecture, this new way of serving up our customers and helping them consume some of this critical technology that they use to operate their security systems.
Right. And so real quick, we had a couple questions come in and I'll jump back to the slide. We had one, asking which cloud system is better for access and video currently. And obviously that's going to depend on a tremendous number of factors, right? For example, do you have a migration path with your existing physical security panels and readers that could be supported by one of the solutions that's on screen here? Or do you have to completely facelift the hardware that's on premise today to be able to take advantage of a solution that maybe meets some of the API requirements that you have? Maybe you really like the user interface and the cost model associated with it, right? So no different than making a decision here over the last, 20 years with a Linnell or software house or what have you. You're still going to have to put together some type of success criteria around why would we make the shift to cloud to begin with? And then what are the existing infrastructure in place that we want to continue to maintain and utilize? Or, going to one of my other talks during this Insight event is, credentials sometimes can be a driver for change because you may be using legacy proximity cards across the enterprise and realize there's an opportunity to maybe move to a more secure smart credential or to biometrics. And that's going to also really require you to lean into what you already have, what your goals long-term are, and then make the decision based on what those cloud solutions can do for you. And that's a little bit more access control heavy just in terms of an evaluation criteria, but I think the same applies to video, right? And we're going to get into that here on what some of those solutions look like. So from a legacy access control architecture, I think we're all pretty familiar with this, and I apologize, it's a little fuzzy, but you guys get the gist, right? You're having to deploy, thick clients onto the field where they're tied to the same network as a master regional server in a lot of cases. And that requires a lot of heavy lifting from not just deployment of infrastructure and capitalization of costs, but also making sure that your LAN or VLAN that are running all of these devices is correctly set up. So there's communication across all of these devices, those servers, and the updates are happening in real time with all of those devices. And this also applies, of course, to the video side of things, right? Having to size and plan for network video recorders that can, not just scale with your deployments, but also be able to manage the bandwidth as well as the frame rates and resolution that you're expecting to be able to go back and review across your video infrastructure, right? And as cameras continue to just get better and have better resolution and capabilities, and in some cases, analytics at the edge for compute power and sending that information back across the network for the security operators to make sense of. There's a lot here that goes into kind of the legacy way of doing things. And so as we look at what that could potentially look like, and this is a really simplified look, and I appreciate, OpenPath kind of sharing this. This starts to get into, how do we reduce the cost and infrastructure on premise and go to a model where any laptop, workstation, mobile phone can access this information via two-factor authentication into the web portal, right? In addition to that, now that it's cloud-based, what APIs open us up to be able to do connections into a Workday, a SailPoint, something that stores identities as a single point of truth. We can now pull that data over and in real time kind of manage the hire to retire life cycle in a much more meaningful way that doesn't rely on an email sent from HR to an on-site property manager or to an area manager that now has to approve that person for work and then send it to the security team to onboard them into the Linnell or Genetec system. So there's a lot more opportunity here. Not to say that it can't be done with the legacy systems, but the cloud systems are purpose-built for being able to drive automation and integration with a variety of different systems. And so, from my perspective, and Steve, I know you're living and breathing in this every day, right? A lot of people are looking for ways to reduce the amount of, one, manual data entry, but two, just kind of that error and risk associated with, how long does it take from an SLA perspective when somebody is terminated within your organization to finally revoke access rights? one of the things that we see is IT is pretty good about it and can remove it via Active Directory or through their ITSMs, in Okta or one of the multi-factor authentication tools. But security sometimes isn't tied into that ecosystem. And so we're seeing, 72 hours plus from the time somebody's termed, where they should have had their access rights revoked, they still have a card that's active in the system and could easily come back to the facility, during that window of opportunity. So that's where we're starting to align and recognize that there's risks associated with this manual process. That's really been the way for so long. I don't know, Steve, if you've got an additional take on that, or you've been seeing things evolve, maybe more video centric as well.
Yeah, Doug, I think the thing I would add to that is it's also these changing consumer expectations, right? So we're seeing this, demand in every single consumer group. And I think of our cardholders as a consumer group, right? So we're providing a service to them as security professionals to secure our properties, provide convenient access to them, and to provide basically instant or real-time change, all of these types of things that we're seeing quicker, faster, easier, right? So as professionals, security professionals that work with access control and video every single day, guess what? Those same demands and expectations are approaching and hitting us, right? So thinking that we can take 72 hours to activate or deactivate a badge, I don't think our consumers, the people that we serve, our stakeholders, are going to be happy with that. They're going to say, well, why can't you do that right now? Why can't you just turn this on? I need to get into this room. I need to go do this job. I need to go do this work, right? They don't understand the old way that we've kind of built our systems and those old workflows. So in order to provide that level of service to our customers, we need to be adapting. We need to be changing the way we do some things. And that's the same way on the video world. I mean, I remember way back, telling people it'd take 72 hours to do an investigation, right? It would take me that long to search through, the VCR tapes or search through all the thousands and thousands of hours of video. Well, the consumers are asking for that sooner again, right? They want that quick video review, that analysis. And we can do that now using AI and computer vision, right? We can quickly search through, identify people, track them throughout a campus, throughout an environment, and really accelerate the time that we can do an investigation. And I think it's a combination of all the things that we're talking about that are going to really stimulate organizations to move and to evolve this way. And it's not, there isn't a one size fits all answer. And that's kind of the reason we've structured this as a high level conversation. Here are the possibilities that exist. Here are the things that we think we should be talking about with our customers, with internally as we're prepping and thinking about how do we provide that service to to the organizations that maybe we've worked with them for maybe 15 or 20 years with their Linnell system. Well, how do we help them transition to the next evolution of that new Linnell system that will be cloud ready? Because there are things that we can do to do that, but there becomes a huge change initiative that needs to start happening. And we need to be helping and talking about some of that and why we want to be doing it, right? Because these are real life scenarios that you're just hitting on, Doug, that are critical to a risk profile for the organizations we serve, but also for making sure that we're providing a high quality service to the cardholders, to the employees, to everybody, the vendors. We haven't talked about visitor management at all, right? But there's some huge tie-ins that go off of the visitor management side as well.
Definitely. So one question that came up here, just about kind of control, right, and the shift to the cloud. And they make a valid point, right? Giving up control solely isn't an IT issue. It's also a compliance and legal issue. The question then becomes, can this data be subpoenaed and provided to authorities without internal legal oversight or intervention? So there's a couple of things in the works with that question. The first is, if something has happened on site, for example, and I, being a termed employee, were using my badge after I was terminated within a 72-hour window, and you wanted to press charges for trespassing as a result of that. chances are that data would be subpoenaed to affirm that, hey, I want to see the video and I want to see the badge access associated with this identity occurring during the times that you as the employer claimed that, in this case, my client was coming on site. So that information would potentially be subpoenaed, and absolutely there'd be an internal legal interview oversight. They'd be involved with the process and probably be willing to turn that information over, right? So if a crime has been committed, in most cases, it could probably be subpoenaed, again, depending on the circumstances. And of course, legal teams, if that any data would be being shared with authorities, would be involved with that. Now, the question then probably becomes, and probably is more specific to, what happens if, high level example, for Linnell has a situation with their cloud and they're being subpoenaed and want information associated with the cloud instances. Well, in that case, that is a tremendously gray area where, they would be asking for data on customers that they don't have access to. So just because AWS or Azure provides access, you as a client to use their services, doesn't mean that they can turn over your data to authorities. So there's still a checks and balances. There's still a legal process that has to be followed. And absolutely, if in any case your data was to be turned over to authorities, not just compliance, but there would be plenty of legal intervention, and your organization would be highly involved in that process. So it can't just be hand over the data kind of question, right? There'd be a process and a due diligence that would occur associated with that. And of course, every circumstance is going to be different. I think about it, too, and our title of our talk, and this is not trying to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but the title of our talk is Decentralized Physical Security. So let's talk about, blockchain and cryptocurrencies real quick. When you look at like the IRS being able to subpoena Coinbase for users to identify who's been using the platform and has had a high level of transactions, well, they can go get that data, whether I wanted them to have access to it or not as an individual. And they can find out if I've been paying my taxes on cryptocurrencies. So there are some areas where that information could be gathered depending on what has happened, what kind of crime could have been potentially committed, all of those nuances. So I think, again, there's a lot that's going to continue to evolve as cloud becomes the primary source of people's interest of going over there. So again, not trying to get too much on a tangent, but just trying to provide maybe some relevant similarities to that situation. So with that, I think where we want to dive in, so we just talked about access control and the differences kind of between the legacy way those systems have been architected and the simplicities now starting to come to the access side. I want to talk about kind of three different areas that the traditional security camera space is evolving from. And Steve, this is really your area of expertise. So I want to kind of turn it over to you for the next few slides to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. And I think everybody's a little familiar with this type of picture, right? We got a bunch of cameras streaming to 1, 2, 3, or 4 locally installed NVRs or network video recorders. Pretty common, something that we would say, oh yeah, I recognize that. That's what I've got deployed in my environment today. But if we go to the next slide, Doug, and we take a look at maybe a different type of architecture and talking, we can go back if you want to into that other one that just kind of explains it a little bit, maybe and prepares it. But we're kind of really looking at a lot of different ways that different companies are taking to approach this. Some of them are storing directly natively on the camera or on the edge. Some of them are streaming directly natively to a cloud. And some of them are using a gateway or a kind of a simplified NVR using solid state drives, reducing the type of load or capabilities of what is happening out at that edge. And it really, these questions become honestly quite individualized or very personalized based on what an organization is looking to achieve and what they're trying to accomplish. I had an organization I was talking with a couple of weeks ago that one of their mandates was to try to get rid of all the servers out in some of their branch banking locations. They felt those servers were using a lot of power. were prone for failure, and they just didn't see the value with it. So by using an edge-based solution with data analytics and built-in AI ML capabilities, we're able to achieve some of those goals for them. So it's pretty important as we're talking about what you want to do for video, that we're exploring all of these different types of items, because the architecture approach, the way we can, kind of try to tackle that problem or that challenge varies quite a bit on each one of these. And maybe go to this is an Arcules example right here. So Arcules is a cloud-first provider, so built all with the cloud. But Arcules does use what they call, like a cloud connector. You'll hear a lot of different terms on these devices that are basically used to buffer, to process some of the video. The benefit of an Arcules approach is, again, it's a cloud managed solution, so always current, getting all the benefits of being in the cloud. However, you can connect with all your existing cameras. And I know that was one of the questions that was asked in the chat window too, which is the most cost-effective solution for cloud CCTV? Well, if you have a whole bunch of IP cameras and you don't want to rip those IP cameras out, you're probably going to be looking at a cloud managed type of solution, right? So it's a little bit of a hybrid environment where you're not streaming natively to a cloud. You're using a device to buffer it, to reduce some of the challenges that exist across an internet connection up to the cloud, but still achieving a lot of the goals and benefits. The next slide is a different partner, a company called Ava. They're a pretty interesting solution in that they do also have those cloud gateway devices that allow you to connect and add in your existing cameras. So if you have a bunch of Axis or Hanwha or Bosch IP cameras out there, they can take those feeds directly, again, cloud manage it. But they've also introduced a line of cameras that have storage natively directly on the cameras, using some advanced AI and computer vision type of technologies for advanced alerting capabilities to do that event-based recording up in the cloud. And that's one of the things that we should talk a little bit about too, is it is kind of changing our thinking about, are we always doing continuous recording, or are we leveraging some of these new AI machine learning analytics capabilities out at the edge to be more thoughtful, to record information and data in a more laser focused type of approach. Again, discussion points that we need to talk about as we're exploring and unpacking and thinking about, well, how do we want to move and how do we want to evolve and what's important to the organization. Doug, let's move to the third architecture slide, because this is the pure cloud environment. There's absolutely nothing that's existing on premise, and it's all being stored and recorded on either the camera or in the cloud. And this slide right here is a Meraki architecture, right? So you'll see on the camera storage, SSD, solid state drives, storing real time what's going on, and then pushing information based off of AI, machine learning, whatever they've got built into the camera in an event-based recording structure up to the Meraki cloud environment. Those are the three common architectures that we do see. Again, which one's best for you? Depends. It's something we'll want to talk about, something we'll want to understand and think through. But that kind of gives everybody a good understanding of the different ways organizations have been approaching it, and thinking about how they want to handle transitioning video to the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cost effective, right? Maybe rip and replace everything that you currently have. It may be a facelift, because you'll realize the benefit of that within a couple of years, right? You may be still running a lot of, analog cameras. I mean, there's still plenty of deployments out there that haven't migrated over to an IP system. So it's going to be very case by case. What makes the most sense? What existing infrastructure you want to continue to leverage, and what kind of model you want to adopt from a pricing perspective. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Doug, before we flip over to the pros and cons and some of the benefits, I do think another piece that people want to think about is how old is their IP cameras, right? Are their IP cameras just a couple of years old? If they're just a couple of years old, you can probably get another five years of life out of them. You know, you might want to look at something that leverages or keeps those. If your IP cameras are 7 years old or older, you know, there might be time to do a technology refresh, and some of the, you know, kind of the brand new solutions that are all cloud native, that are all on the camera, they might make more sense. So again, not one, I wish we could give everybody just, hey, do this, right? This is the right way. But the reality is there's a lot of choices. There's a lot of different approaches, and really taking a look at what that unique situation is like is pretty important.
Absolutely. So this is kind of where we get into that success criteria. How do we help navigate the different, you know, benefits of the cloud against what you may already have today? And I think one of the places we start with, right, is security and reliability. I mean, you know, first off, these are life safety systems. So we, one, can't have, you know, PII get breached. We can't have these systems go down at all, really. I mean, we have to have almost 100% uptime across these systems. So in my mind, these end up being two of the biggest drivers when evaluating anything. Do they have great security protocols? Who are their partners in the cloud? How are they streaming? Does data get encrypted both in transit and at rest? And then from a reliability perspective, right? We look at, you know, again, the cost benefit from what hardware you've deployed from an on-premise perspective. So what are those legacy systems? How long have they been deployed? Because that's another cost driver. If you've got really, you know, old hardware still running your legacy access control system, whether it's servers, workstations, laptops, you name it, what better time then to, you know, migrate to a cloud solution? Then in most cases, these data centers are running state-of-the-art hardware. They're in, you know, these hardened facilities that have the highest level of security protocols in place, both from a physical security perspective as well as a logical perspective. And you get to take advantage now of not having to deal with the backups, the redundancy, the data recovery side of it, because these are built for that resiliency. So I think across, you know, these two areas, that's one of the things driving cloud applications, is the fact that they have sometimes better security than what even enterprises think that they have. And the reliability, again, just from an uptime perspective, tends to lend itself to making a pretty good argument for that move.
Yeah, Doug, I'll just add in there, and I'll talk a little bit about the Meraki solution. Again, we're just trying to educate and keep people informed. But, you know, one of the things that I just ran into with Meraki, we were looking at doing some wireless camera deployments, and the question came into, well, how do you authenticate this camera across a wireless camera network? What is this all starting to look like? And Meraki actually uses their own wireless certificate, and it's pretty important to them that using that certificate provide that level of security that when it's authenticating to the network wirelessly and even in a wired configuration, that is connecting back to that cloud environment, and you know exactly what devices are connecting and, you know, basically streaming to it. And so these points right here, I think, are really important for organizations to understand, ask a lot of questions up front. And in this situation, the customer was like, well, we don't want to use a Meraki certificate. We want to use our own certificate. And, you know, that's kind of an awkward position as a system integrator, because both of those organizations you can see as being right. I mean, I can see the person that's in charge of their IT certificates and all their trust that they do on their IT network going, well, yeah, you need to own that. And I could see Meraki going, but we don't want to expose ourselves to any risk because you guys aren't doing it the way we want you to do it, right? So having those discussions up front before you get too down the path on, hey, I want this product, I want this solution, right? I think Doug alluded to it, like go through the checklist, go through the requirements, understand what all the stakeholders in your organization are going to want and need, make a good educated decision. I think that's going to be the way to go about it, because a lot of these systems and the technologies are, they approach things differently, right? You just want to get the stuff that works for you.
Right. Right. And that leads us right into, scalability and cost end up being, huge considerations here. And I look at scalability over the last year, both in increase and decrease of facilities, right, that you may have under management. With people leaving the work, a lot of organizations are shifting away from having a really large real estate portfolio and moving into more of a hybrid model. So it goes both ways. You may have been the enterprise that scaled up very quickly and you had to add infrastructure and go from, a single server to a regional to a master type of architecture. And the inverse may be happening right now, where you spent all this money on this infrastructure and now you're seeing it get, kind of pushed to the side because you're scaling down the number of facilities that you have and it's not as required. So cloud scalability is one that you can really control your costs very effectively in real time based on those business decisions that you end up making, right? And so that not just, affects how your organization grows and retracts, but it also impacts those costs. And it's, a lot easier pill to swallow when you don't have to spend, $20,000, $30,000 on your servers, and you can just scale and, base it on usage. So you've got those considerations. And then obviously, being conscious of time here, speed to value, time to value can't be measured, right? The procurement process sometimes for CapEx expenditures on new server architecture and whether it's video or secure access based, to be able to stand up an AWS node in, a matter of, minutes, hours, depending on what you're trying to do, absolutely adds to that conversation. And then maintenance, of course, reducing, not just software maintenance, being real-time updates from these cloud providers, but you also reduce that hardware maintenance as well. And we've had a few questions kind of run in here real quick. Let's address that real quick. So we got one question go ahead.
I think the SLA question is timely right here, right? Is one of the questions where aren't SLAs one of the most important things to consider? And absolutely it is. We're reshaping and reformatting all of our partner agreements to be addressing SLAs, because it just changes the dynamics, right? So SLAs are very, very important. Those are things that we need to be understanding, talking about, and making sure we've got the right type of expectations set up front as well.
Yeah, most SLAs are, everybody's got that 99.9% uptime. They wouldn't be able to be in business in physical, security without that level of uptime and support. Routine maintenance cannot take down anybody's system, right? So they've got to have very good, and agile methodologies to be able to continue to provide the uptime even during hardware or software maintenance, right? The other thing we just want to talk about real quick here is accessibility, right? So now instead of having to have a really strong network architecture to be able to deliver, your security team with visibility into these systems, now they can be accessed from anywhere. And now they can have a really good mobile experience as well. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing, right, as part of this shift over the last year is the fact that can you decentralize your SOC and NOC teams to where they can now work remotely? You don't have to have everybody in this purpose-built fusion center to be successful. And so that also plays into the ability of reducing, the VPN coverage and the lag time that can sometimes occur there. So that's another piece of it. And of course, Steve touched on this a bunch, but just the intelligence of being able to have analytics in these cloud solutions, reducing the compute power required on premise now. You can get better intelligence, better APIs, better integrations to some of the other platforms as a result of that. But, it's not all benefits. This is something that, questions to consider within your organization is, we've hit on it. And I think the question just came up as well with the storage of data in multiple locations, devices, maybe regions from like an AWS perspective. How do you ensure GDPR compliance? Well, that all plays into where the stored data is going to be. And do you align with, EU located GDPR compliant AWS instances, who has access to that data, what level of security and control do they have over that? Those are all questions that we can absolutely help navigate. And obviously we're at time here, so I just want to be conscious of that as we kind of wrap up. But data privacy issues are certainly something to take into consideration. Do all geographies have the same level of reliable, consistent connectivity? That's a great issue for video. There may be smaller sites that don't have bandwidth to support a streaming cloud video solution. So one of the hybrid ones shown previously, where maybe you've got that buffer edge device, or the camera itself is identifying and performing the analytics before it streams that video, can all be ways to architect this in a very cost-effective and conscientious manner. And really at the end of the day, right, as you walk through all of this, the business questions become, well, does your organization do other business critical activities, potentially with PII in the cloud? And how are those secured as well? And can we mirror that from a physical security perspective as well? So with that, the early adopters in this space, Steve, that we're seeing, small to medium-sized businesses are traditionally right now cloud first, right? They're coming out of the gates and their solutions are being built in the cloud. So it's an easy win for them to be able to have physical security in the cloud, because they don't want to manage and deploy any type of server hardware at their locations, especially if they're a small business. The other part of this is, understanding the market where, does your business have the technical resources to manage kind of a complex on-prem client server architecture? We've got a lot of manufacturing partners, a lot of organizations that are tech first that are saying, look, we're not in the business of maintaining, sourcing, and managing servers. So it makes sense at this juncture to start to migrate to something where we can take that off and focus on our core business responsibilities. So, with that, we're at time. If there's any other questions, we certainly want to see those get surfaced here in the chat. But, closing thoughts from you, Steve, and I'll give my 2 cents here real quick and turn things over to you. But, this is moving so very quickly, probably faster than most adoption that we've seen across the physical security industry in years prior. Even the migration from analog to IP, right, took time and was met with some pushback. So here we're seeing, some of that, but to a much lesser degree and a lot moving very quickly. So if this is something that's of interest to you, I encourage, if you're a customer of Convergence, if you're considering this, engage with your account executive, have them bring myself, Steve, and other resources on our team to the table to navigate this specific to your use cases, to the equipment that you have in place, to really understand what your options are, what could be the right fit, and what other business stakeholders may be valuable in having that joint conversation with us as we figure out how to move you forward with your security strategy. And Steve, any closing thoughts from your side?
Doug, I mean, this is, really meant as that primer, that early conversations to really zoom way out on the conversation to get people thinking about it. And I think you hit it at the end there, that the rapid pace at which this is picking up and things that, I know of, Fortune 20 companies that 18 months and even 12 months ago said they were never moving their security systems to the cloud, we're scrambling, trying to help them to navigate some of these questions and these topics that we're discussing today. And I think the key point that I'd like to leave with our colleagues, leave with any, customers or potential customers, is all the things that we've talked about, all the chat things that we've, discussed. They're really important things to be collaborating on. People sometimes think, well, this is just a cloud-based system, right? What's the big deal? As we've kind of talked through in the conversation today, there are a lot of nuances. Open up the conversation, have those discussions, think about it. And we didn't even talk about transitioning a legacy access control system up to the cloud and some of those complexities that go with that. There's all kinds of data cleansing and everything that needs to go into some of those things. So these are big topics. We know we're at the beginning of the process for a lot of our customers, and just trying to help with that. Wish we had more time, Doug, because we could expand upon this a little bit, but I think we've accomplished our goals for the agenda today. And we'll really like to thank you for leading this and really spearheading this effort and conversation.
Well, much appreciated, Steve, and to all of you watching today. Thank you so much. Hopefully Insight is giving you access to a lot of these types of conversations that continue to make you, really at the end of the day, just to think about and encourage development of how you're approaching security across your organization. So with that, haven't seen any additional questions, but we are at time. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to engaging with you more in the coming weeks and months.